Hi, gays. I'm Michael Montana Hilliard with Gaye Magazine. I'm so excited because today we are exclusively interviewing actor Tory Devon Smith. Tory's making history as the first actor to play the iconic writer and civil rights activist James Baldwin on film. His short film is titled The Baldwin Archives, set to release this Friday. Tory, how are you?
I'm doing so good, Michael. How are you?
I'm so good. I'm so excited to be talking to you.
Oh gosh, thank you so much. It's very gracious of you.
Yes, so there's so much to unpack because you're the first person to ever play him on screen technically when the film comes out. How does that feel?
It seems to me that the whole effort is not to avoid suffering or the inevitable deformations which one encounters in a life, but to use them, to use one's suffering to understand the suffering of other people.
It seems to me that the whole effort is not to avoid suffering or the inevitable deformations which one encounters in a life, but to use them. To use one's suffering to understand the suffering of other people.
It feels really incredible. I believe at the time when I was starting the project, I knew that this novelty would be true. Because I was doing my research for years, and there have been performances of James Baldwin on the stage.
Yes.
But not quite film in this particular way, in this visual medium, in this visual medium, in this story, this sort of biopic way. And so, sure, there were moments of sort of pressure, and then there were moments of absolute glee because I thought, well, then great, I get to sort of invent my perspective on him. So it's exciting and a bit daunting. But because this film is a reenactment of an interview that he gave back from 1963, I'm not necessarily using my words. We didn't make up sort of a fictional script. We took it from his actual, that actual interview. And so you feel really safe within his words. You know what I mean?
Yes,
There,
totally.
there doesn't have to be, in a sense, a debate about, oh, you didn't really sort of capture him, when in essence it's like, well, no, these are his words.
Yes. So I wanna back it up just a little bit for our viewers that may not know you or may not be completely familiar with your work. One thing that I really find really cool about your story is, you were raised in the foster care system and, you perform, you start performing. What made you want to like officially go into acting like as a professional?
Well, I caught the bug pretty early because in the foster care system, from what I know now, and that took some therapy, is
Yeah.
that that's a traumatic childhood. Even though when you're going through that system, you don't think of it in that way. You just think this is my reality. And I just remember going to the library and opening books and reading them as a kid, and then I just naturally wanted to perform these stories. And then I started to enter oral language festivals in school. And then I started to do theater in junior high and high school. So I caught the bug really, 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 really early. And then, of course, that was my major at university. I studied theater. And you don't really, to be honest, you don't really understand, you know, you don't really understand it as a profession, really. Specifically when I was in college, I was simply doing theater. I didn't really think about, well, how am I going to sort of make a living from this? What is that professional world like, specifically in Hollywood? So it's been an education, really, for me.
Nice. So in preparation, you know, so you said you'd read and stuff like that. For you, is there any earlier works of James Baldwin that you remember? Like, is there any of his earlier works that you remember like really being impactful for you when you were younger, or when you first read it?
No, I actually came upon James Baldwin years ago when I got interested in doing a project on him. Um, so the spark happened rather late in life. We touched upon James Baldwin in an African American Studies class that I took at LMU. in connection to Richard Wright's book Native Son, but I actually didn't know a lot about him until, until I was much older, in my 30s.
Yeah.
So there wasn't anything that actually interested me in him, because I actually didn't know much about him.
Gotcha.
When I think about what helped me, who was the artist that helped me ascend into my black gayness, my black male gayness, it was really Elin Harris. I read
Oh,
his novels and discovered his novels. So yeah, James Baldwin came later.
nice, nice. As far as playing, a character as iconic as James Baldwin, or as a person, really, um, in what ways did you, aside from just doing the research, how did you prepare? Was there anything like specific that you feel like you did differently than you would have expected to do when you were going through the process of all this? Even though I know you said y'all pretty much, did much of a reenactment, how did you prepare?
Well, I prepared sort of for years, basically, because in the beginning, when I became interested in James Baldwin, I thought, okay, I'll write a screenplay on his life, because I became really interested in his personal life, not so much an investigation in his work, but how did he operate as a Black queer man in that tumultuous era?
Yeah.
That's what I became interested in. And what really, I'm an actor who works primarily who works from the outside in. I really start with voice and behavior. And I remember I was looking for subject matter that was connected to my identity. And I came upon James Baldwin. It was an interview that he gave back in 1969 on the Dick Cavett show. And something about him, I was like, who is this man? He was just ferociously charismatic and energetic and direct and intense. And I thought, oh my gosh. And I was really attracted to his sort of eccentric behavior. That really got me going. And so I started to simply mimic him when I would watch these interviews. Because there's so much archival footage on the internet, on YouTube of him. And so it was really him as a person, him physically, that attracted me. And so I started with that. And then I was searching for a story. I was searching for what can I do to sort of tell a story? And because I am not a writer, I thought, ooh, no, I ain't no screenwriter. I ain't gonna do that. But then I remember in the beginning of my acting career, I would submit myself for jobs, and I did those like TLC shows, like 16 and didn't know you was pregnant, and sex sent me to the ER, or whatever those reenactment shows was. And I thought, oh, a reenactment. And there were a plethora of interviews that I was sort of interested in. And this particular interview from 1963 that we recreated, that he gave to the BBC, that really intrigued me, mainly because he talked about his life from a personal standpoint. And I was really, again, my investigation was with him as a person. Yeah, so that's how it began.
Nice. And something I found really really interesting is that this project, of course you come up with the idea, and then from there you went and kind of crowdfunded with Indiegogo, and I mean you met the goal, meaning it's got to be so awesome to know so many people were also invested in the project and helping raise the funds. How was that for you? Do you remember, like, what were your expectations early on? Did you think it would get this far, or did you kind of like did you think people would be interested?
I didn't think people would be interested. I didn't. It was so wonderful to know that my personal network of people were going to support me. I worked really hard during that campaign, and I, solely raised that money myself. So it was surprising, because I don't know, I guess the sort of insecurity of an artist, you think no one's going to care, but they actually do. And I think it's because I think you could see the passion that I had, and the creative team around the film had for this particular man, for this interview. So it was rather surprising, and it's so gratifying at the same time.
Nice, nice. So when, you first, how did you go about the process of, finding, the actors and the crew and, and all the people that kind of ended up helping with this, what, what was that process like for you? If, this being, kind of like your first type of project you're spearheading, how did you figure that all out? I'm sure that's like all uncharted territory as an actor, or can be.
Well, you have your creative tribe, which I think is important, really for your survival as an artist, specifically in this industry. Um, I was a huge friend of a good friend of mine who's a director. Her name is Laura C. And so I simply visualized her as the director. I was a fan of her short film work. She has a collaborative artist named John Orphan, who's the cinematographer. And his work is just beautiful and brilliant. And so I spoke with them about this particular project and bringing it to life. And so it was, including them, made this a reality. In terms of the actors, I worked with Jordan Gavaris, who was an Orphan Black. He's of Orphan Black fame. And I worked with him on a show called The Coop on an app called Eco that, um, I guess people watch. But anyway, we worked together and we played husbands who were on the brink of divorce. And he's such an incredibly talented, nuanced performer. And I very much visualized him in the role. He's a Canadian actor, but on Orphan Black, he did such a great job as this sort of, as this British character. And I thought, oh my God, you'd be really great for Peter Duval Smith, who's the interviewer. And so it's really the people that were connected in my world who came and I asked and they said yes.
And it's, you can definitely tell that it is like your, from the clips I've seen and just behind the scenes stuff, you can definitely tell you guys it was a labor of love. Not only that, but the whole, like you said, the community aspect, you can tell there was like a lot of, love between all of you guys in getting it right. um can you describe to me when, because I'm sure, you go through all this process, I'm sure y'all had, tons of meetings and all this, what was it like for you first stepping onto that set? Like, what, how did you feel that day, or the first time you stepped into the character, like, officially?
It was really interesting. I believe Laura C., the director, created a really calming sort of energy in that room. So that really, really helped me concentrate, I believe. And also, too, it's also about physically putting him on. Our makeup artist Julie Hassett and Kevin Haney were brilliant in terms of the makeup and the hair, and it was very sort of subtle changes to me as a being. But the director Laura was really adamant about my essence not being lost. Yeah, and also too, this was an essence performance. This is not a straight on, in a sense, imitation, because biopics have been very popular as of late. It's a subgenre that has impressed people, right? And imitation does that. I mean, look at these TikToks of people lip syncing. For some reason, that just garners people's attention. They think it's like a very sort of skillful thing. But I think when you're trying to capture a human being, and specifically an icon, you're not necessarily going to be their exact twin, and you really concentrate on, what is he saying? That's what you concentrate on. So stepping onto the set and having sort of this very sort of serene energy, and also having my dialect coach there with me, Andrea Odenov, was really, really important. So, and it was interesting. The original interview was about 30 minutes long, and I adapted that interview, and it's about sort of, we did about 7 minutes of it. And so in terms of Laura's direction, we did the entire interview for every take. So every single take, we did all 7 minutes. Yeah. And so that repetition, finding new colors within the, sort of the expression of these words for me was really exciting. So to step into the set and take him on, to go into that sort of imagination, that transformation of him, was one of the most special days of my life.
Oh my goodness, that's beautiful. I can only imagine. From the behind the scenes videos and set pictures, I saw how meticulous the wardrobe was and the styling and y'all the pieces that you guys use. You know how was how did you figure out how to put all of that together? And I did see that the set was very simple, but like I said, the wardrobe was very in my opinion, like just spot on. um what was your favorite aspect of your costuming?
Favorite aspect of the costuming? Um, I think working with Alex, the costume designer, was really wonderful. In terms of how just the simplicity, in terms of what he wanted to created on Baldwin. Um, the makeup did a lot for me. That was something that I really, really wanted. I remember during the process of garnering different creatives for this piece, I wanted to do his teeth because he has a very distinct gap and very big teeth. Because my features don't necessarily, I don't necessarily look like him. He had these very distinctive big eyes and that big mouth with that big, sort of glorious gap in his teeth. Um, and I wanted to get an essence of that. That made me feel honest within the character. And again, I'm an actor who worked from the outside in. So to me, the costume, it was really sort of the makeup that really helped. The simplicity in the way that he dressed, the movement, putting on that coat and that suit, yeah, yeah, I think that was really the makeup really helped.
Awesome. So you know in over the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of controversial controversy regarding actors and actors playing in films and movies that are based on people's lives. um do you think it's important for a person who is playing a queer person to be a queer to be should the role be played by a queer actor is what I'm asking? Do I know with you with Baldwin, do you think that's important, or do you think it's more about like what a person can bring to the role?
Yes, gays should play gays. Nothing else. I don't care. No. Um, I mean, I know it's a controversy, but I come from the world of theater. And I feel like acting is about transformation and imagination. Um, I've learned so much from the plethora of roles that I played, for instance, in college. You know, I played a homophobic mechanic in the Laramie Project. I played a young student during apartheid in South Africa in My Children, My Africa. Um, I played a very horny cabaret boy in the musical Cabaret. I mean, I find that acting is about taking on a different circumstance, a different condition outside of yourself, because in that, your humanity is expanded. You know what I mean? Um, but I do believe in equality. Yeah. And when it comes to specifically Hollywood, to me, there hasn't been an equality of queer actors playing a plethora of roles. And so that's why the conversation has been happening too. When you're criminally underrepresented, it becomes an issue, and everyone deserves a seat at the table. So I do think it is important for those of certain cultures, of certain races, to tell their own stories, specifically in an industry where the white gatekeepers have been telling our stories. And in many instances, in terms of how they tell those stories, has been detrimental to our communities. Um, the nuances of how we operate as human beings have been lost. And so it is important that queer, that trans, that women, you know, write these stories. They create these stories for the world to see, to have a different perspective um, from what's been told. It's it's sort of a complicated, it's sort of a complicated issue,
Yeah.
I think. Um, so I don't wholly believe that you need to come from that particular condition to play the role. But I think in order to, again, have equality across the board, that needs to be important right now.
Got you. Do you think that in Hollywood, do you think that we are moving in a better, more inclusive direction as far as, roles for Black queer people, or do you think there's like a lot? Do you think there? I mean, of course, there's always room to grow, but have you seen that change in your time in the industry? So far.
Absolutely, actually. When I think about when I broke through in the industry around 2015, even the shift from that time to now was really, really grand. And I'm a kid of the 90s. And so when I saw any sort of character depicted that resembled me, there was a stereotype, and it did seem very limited. I find now that I'm in the industry and also experiencing these roles and these projects as an audience member, I have seen the plethora grow. I have seen a range of really unique gay roles. Um, and I haven't, an inside perspective because I'm auditioning for them. So there has been progress. And and my opinion is we have to acknowledge the progress because we were fighting for the progress. Those voices have been heard. Is there always more work to do? Absolutely. Specifically when it comes to power. Power is really important. When we have several people of color on that fortune list of the top highest paid actors in the world, that's when I feel like, yeah, that's change is happening because we got power now. We getting paid money, right? We still have yet to get there. I mean, when I think about that list, Denzel Washington and Will Smith were always the only two. The only two. And I think obviously a very prominent Indian actor from India. I think he was up there because Bollywood is huge. But yeah, I think there is more work to do in terms of power. Yeah, but when I'm seeing creatively, and specifically from my friends who are also in the industry, you know what I mean? They are writing their stories. It's happening now. It really, really is.
I love that. That's incredible. It's good to get the insight, because you've been in the industry for so long, and you are now seeing that for you. Beyond this film is telling your own stories or telling other stories. Is that something that you want to continue to do? Are you wanting to step behind the camera? Are you wanting to write other stories? Do you see that in your future?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I don't consider myself a writer mainly because I adapted, something that was already there.
Yeah.
I don't fancy myself a writer. I will say though, it was so wonderful to have autonomy in my life as an actor with this project. Usually I don't, as actors, you are reliant on a business team. You're reliant on casting directors and studios and networks to say yes to you. And this was obviously a project that we did independently, and it wasn't for a monetary gain. It was really, because we didn't do this to make money. You don't make short films to make money. Um, and so it was so lovely to work specifically, just artistically and creatively. I'm like, oh gosh, I want to work like this all the time. You know what I mean? Um, it was an incredible experience. So my want is to absolutely help others, um, sort of, reach their artistic and creative wants in the future. I would love to create more work and collaborate. Collaboration is so wonderful. I mean, again, I come from the theater, and theater is all about community. Film is too. You know what I mean? It's so interesting. I'm sort of being critical here, but I think when it comes to Hollywood in America, actors are given so much reverence, mainly because, for one, it's who you see as an audience member. And I think sometimes when it comes to film, actors get a lot of credit, but I'm just like, the actors, they're just one part of the puzzle that's being made without them. Film, television, cinema. I mean, that really is the directors, the writers, the editors' realm. You know what I mean? You're a part of something, yeah.
Awesome, awesome. So, you've taken this film to, different festivals, and it's been selected, and it's gotten such a great reception, and, the reviews are awesome. How does that feel?
Really wonderful. I think a part of me was I was sort of hesitant to think that this would be entertaining enough. We're in an era where spectacle is really big. People love spectacle, so it's really difficult to even not independently, when you think about studios, getting sort of independent films out there and produced and financed. It's really, really difficult. Again, spectacle and IP, I mean, that's huge. And so I thought, oh, this film is simply about two people talking in a room, you know. And I was just sort of afraid that it wasn't going to be interesting. So I thought, oh, none of these festivals are gonna like it. No, everyone's just gonna see it as boring. Now, granted, me, like, I'm an actor, so I'm like, two people in a room, give me 5 hours of that shit. I'm like, yes, film. Um, but it was interesting. My director, she said something so wonderful. She said, the writing, the dialogue is the compelling narrative. People will find that compelling. And I gotta say, every single time I went to a festival, and after the film was screened, and I would talk to someone, you know, the conversations that would spawn from the film. It's so wonderful when you're a part of a piece that's beyond you. Yeah, this somewhat feels almost, and I did design it that way. I really did. I wanted an acting showcase for myself as well. You know what I mean? I thought, yeah, I can use this to my benefit. If the industry sees me in this way, then they'll be interested in me as an asset to sell their product. An actor to sell the show, an actor to sell the movie. But it's so wonderful when something is bigger than you. You know what I mean? Um, Again, it's so gratifying. It's so wonderful.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Again, just from the parts that I watched, I was, it's gonna sound silly because yes, you're acting, but I felt so immersed in, you know, seeing you play the role and the hair and everything. So sitting, talking to you now, I'm like, whoa, like he killed that because he's, your personality is so different than what came across. Um, in that role. I mean, it's it was amazing. So we've you know by technicality, you're again first person to really pick up the role in such a big way. This week, it was announced that Billy Porter would be doing his adaptation of it. And I mean, amazing, right? I mean, amazing, right? But for you, how did you feel? Either how did you feel when that was announced?
Well, I know Billy Porter. We worked together on a Netflix series called The Get Down. And I remember that experience. It was so interesting. Yahya Abdul Mateen II, who played Cadillac in the show, and he's having such an incredible career. And we were sitting in the makeup chairs, and we turned to our right, and it's just like we both looked at each other. We just like, is that Billy Porter? Is that Billy Porter? And I remember going up to him on set, and he was sitting alone, going over his lines in the disco club. And I went up to him and I said, "I want to thank you, um, because you being who you are allows me. It really does allow me." And we soon became like fast, girlfriends on set. I mean, I absolutely adore him. And so this is incredible news that he is playing that icon. So it was really exciting. And it's so interesting because, I'll be looking at Black Twitter, and it was so interesting. A lot of people, and maybe this is something that's controversial, but there were certain comments that talked about how James Baldwin never centered his gayness. And so they thought like, oh, Billy shouldn't play him because he's so out and proud, if you will. They were making a ridiculous judgment. And it's so interesting that in this day and age, casting this, Black, gay, proud man in a role for a Black queer, artist is radical. You know what I mean? It's like, are you trying to neuter Baldwin's gayness? He was a homosexual. He was queer. But, he slept with men. His second novel was a gay novel, which is, his agent did not want him to do. If you read Another Country, I mean, he's talking about Black queerness and the spectrum of sexuality with a main Black male character. He was open about his queerness. I mean, they used to call Baldwin Martin Luther Queen. So it was out there. It was out there. So it's interesting to have seen some of the reactions to Billy's casting and people almost being upset that he's a gay person playing this role. I thought, oh my gosh, how ridiculous, and hell yeah for Billy.
Yeah. No, yeah. Have you been able to speak with him, by chance about your project or about his project, or have y'all been able to speak?
Yeah, we spoke briefly, actually, several months ago, I want to say, and we saw each other and rekindled our little friendship because we haven't seen each other in a long time. And so, yeah, I very much told him about the short. And I knew a tiny bit about this particular project. And so I was really, really sort of ecstatic. So my hope is to actually collaborate, get on it in some way. So we'll see.
Awesome. No, for sure. As far as, when, this short is out, what is something that you want audiences to, take from it? What is something that you hope that they, take from seeing this short film?
It's so interesting because I get asked that question, and I was asked that question during interviews last year, and I honestly don't think it's my responsibility. The audience will take what they will from it. I think the words are so dense and beautiful that there's no need for me to direct an audience in terms of how to think. Let the word speak for itself.
I feel that, and look, the way I was looking, I was like, "Oh, it's gonna speak all right," because it was, it was, fantastic. For you moving forward, what do you hope to accomplish next after this? As far as your career goals, maybe personal goals. What's next for you?
We don't know what's next because this writer's strike is pending.
Ooh, yup.
So I don't necessarily know. I'm a working actor. You simply want to work. I hope that something interesting comes my way. In the meantime, I'm also an adjunct professor teaching acting at my alma mater at Loyola Marymount University, which has been quite an incredible experience to sort of dive back into the craft in an interesting way, to be of service to others, which is so wonderful because being an actor, you need a sense of, you do have to be sort of self-interested and have a healthy ego about yourself because you got to believe in yourself more than anybody else, right? But it's so nice to be selfless, to not think about my career and where it's going. Because being an actor, my God, it's a leap of faith. You don't know where the next thing is coming from, And then we have this, unprecedented pandemic affect every industry. It is, it's a bit of an unnerving time. It's interesting though. I think during 2020 when we were all locked up, I sort of went into myself and I thought, well, I don't know if we'll ever be able to act again because that's such a public activity. And I thought, well, what is it about acting that I loved? And I said to myself, oh, I love the exercise of it. It does something for my soul. It does something for me. It's precious to me. Sometimes I'm quite judgmental of certain actors who are just like, acting is like everything to me. I think it's so amazing. I think it's the greatest thing in the world. And I'm just like, calm your motherfucking ass down. But it does something for me. Yeah. So I hope something comes around the bend. That's all I can hope for now. And simply work on myself.
Take too much of your time before we go. Is there a way that we can, further connect with the film and connect with you online? What are the best ways to connect with you?
You can follow me on social media.
Awesome.
I'm at Tory Devon Smith on Instagram. You can also follow the film, the Baldwin Archives on Instagram, at Baldwin Movie on Twitter. We also have a website, www.thebaldwinarchives.com. I thought I put another W in there. Yeah. So yeah, of course, I'm public, so you can see me. Just don't hack me, cause I ain't got the time. I ain't got the time to be
they be
hacked.
hacking, child. They be hacking.
I'm tired. So,
I feel that. Tory, thank you so much for your time. I'm excited for everybody to see this film. I'm excited for everybody to, see you take on the role. And we here at Gaye are always here to support you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Michael.
All right.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Michael.
All right.